Hello, and welcome to this special presentation of Those Who Serve, a KGW series that brings to light the stories of people who have dedicated their lives to service. With me is Pat Dooris, reporter for this series. Pat, I love every year we get together and you kind of show us the best of. Hard to pick the best of us as you profile here. But one thing that they all seem to have in common is sincerity, a true love for other people and a willingness to help out.
Yeah, I think that's right. These people have a calling to service, and it's a calling they really can't ignore. It's part of who they are. You know,
you were out to sea with a Columbia riverboat pilot. You tracked a mountain rescue story up on Mount Hood, which that's riveting. You meet all these people from different walks of life, you know, trying to do great things in our community, and as you mentioned, big or small.
Yeah, and it's always inspiring. And so is our first story. This is renowned evangelist Luis Palau we're going to introduce you to. And when you meet him, you'll see he is as genuine as they get.
This was in Bogota, Colombia, and it was the first big campaign of our life.
It's part of the legend of the Luis Palau Association.
So we paraded down the street.
The first big city rally that confirmed for the evangelist that he could attract and hold a crowd. He remembers telling them about God's love and promise.
He liberates us from the conscience of sin, the chains of sin, and the condemnation of sin. Wow. That was the message. Nice. I remember because I've used it hundreds of times.
Palau grew up in Argentina and felt the call to serve after a stranger knocked on the family's door and gave his parents a Bible. Early on, he embraced communication technology as a way to spread the message of God's love. By the time he was just 19, Palau had talked a radio station owner into selling him 7 minutes of airtime after the local news so that he could evangelize to the listeners.
So we pick up something on the news, you know, a train crash in India. We talk about, you know, why do accidents happen? How is God here?
In his early 20s, Palau came to the Portland area to attend what is now Multnomah Bible Seminary. That's where he met his future wife, Pat, who grew up in the Portland area.
So about that age is when I thought, I think I can help more people, and I'd love to do it, just giving my life to helping them meet God.
After graduating, he hit the road, telling people about God with his Bible-based teachings.
So we began to have these rallies, you know, gathering people first in small street meetings, and people hurled insults, told us where to go. Yeah, and then we built a tent. We got some business guys to help us put up a tent. And then we moved from there to stadiums, you know, and it sort of grew and grew.
In the year 2000, Palau's festival in Portland gathered 140,000 people over 2 days along the city's waterfront. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The Reverend Billy Graham once told Palau that if he really wanted to reach people, he needed to go to the big cities. And so he did. In 1984, he brought his rally to London. In 1989, he was in the Soviet Union on nationwide TV.
We were amazed. We found ourselves in the Soviet Union. I think I spoke in about 12 of those countries, and they even filmed it on TV, showed it for free nationally. Total surprise, you know.
Over the course of his career using radio, TV, and personal appearances, Palau estimates he's communicated God's love and forgiveness to 1 billion people. Yes, 1 billion.
Yeah.
Palau no longer travels. At 84, he is approaching the end of his ministry and his life.
And he bluntly said, yeah, you got stage 4, left lung. All I can offer you, there's no cure. Surgery, no, won't do it.
The man who spent his life serving others and telling them about God and the afterlife is not afraid of death.
So what do you think it's going to be like when you die?
I mean, it'll be perfection. Everything will be glorious. No more crying, no more pain, no more tears, no more sickness.
His sons will continue the ministry after him. Andrew is a preacher in his own right, and Kevin runs the business.
It's been a good life.
In the meantime, Luis Palau is grateful for the chance to serve.
It's a sheer pleasure to point people to your Creator who loves you. Many people can't believe that God really loves them. They feel unworthy and so on. Others feel other thoughts. But, you know, you want to help people know their Creator, be at peace, and enjoy life on earth as well as get ready for the big one.
Wow, I mean, he is an extraordinary man.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, pretty open about the fact that he's coming to the end of his days.
Right, although it's now sort of unclear when those will be. I was just with him this week, and he's celebrating his 85th birthday. He said the doctors now tell him he might live 2 or 3 more years.
Pat, fantastic story. We have more great stories to come. Up next, it's one of the most treacherous bodies of water in the world. Pat takes us to the Columbia River Bar and the ship pilots who risk their lives to bring the giant freighters into port. And meet the retired sheriff who has literally saved hundreds of people who were lost on Mount Hood. And later, living history, we meet the 100-year-old World War II vet and hear how his humble beginnings gave him purpose. Pat, in this next story, one of the things that really astounds me is when I think about the Columbia River Bar, and that's where the great river dumps out into the ocean. That spot has claimed more than 2,000 ships in its time. I mean, that is like Bermuda Triangle numbers for me. And there are men and women who brave those waters every day.
Yeah. Well, when photojournalist Kurt Austin and I went out, it was a relatively calm day for them, but it was still an interesting ride for us, no doubt about it.
And they're still out there on not calm days as well.
That's right. Those are the days when the bar pilots really earn their money, the days when the ocean is at its worst.
It's early December, and 10 miles off the coast of Oregon, a raw northwest day lashes anyone foolish enough to step outside. The big ship is called Vogamia. It's the length of 2 football fields, and it needs to motor up the Columbia River to pick up cargo. The patch of water separating the river from the ocean is called the bar, and the Columbia River Bar can be one of the roughest sections of water in the world. More than 2,000 ships have gone down here since the late 1700s, which is why a bar pilot is about to get on board and help steer the big ship safely across the bar.
They're self-employed individuals that every day go to work and risk their lives, and so I do think that they are looked up to by a lot of people in the industry. And
John Coyle is chairman of the Columbia River Steamship Operators Association. That's an industry group involved with the big freight ships.
These guys are fearless. They go out in storms, and we have terminals, grain elevators. We have all types of industry that is waiting for these vessels, and the schedules are very important because there's huge amounts of money that are involved in being on time, being where you're supposed to be, because we have all this cargo coming in through rail and barges, and if the ships don't arrive on time, it costs money.
The traffic on the Columbia River and closer to Portland, the Willamette River is nearly constant, with an average of 10 ships coming or going across the bar each day. Total value of all that commerce is roughly $24 billion a year. I recently got to go out with the pilots to see what it's like on a calm day. Our guide is Dan Jordan. He spent 24 years on big ships in seas all over the world, and for the last 14 years has been a Columbia River bar pilot.
No, I still like the ships. I like working on the water, and being a pilot gets me home more.
Today we're heading out on a $6 million boat owned by the pilots.
So this is the pilot boat Astoria. It's what we'll be taking out today to board a couple of ships.
The bar pilots each own a piece of their company, sort of like partners in a law firm. They in turn get paid by the companies that own the ships. They've invested in fast, safe transportation like these pilot boats to get them out to the ships fast and without any fuss, no matter the weather. 70% of the time when it's not awful outside, they arrive using their helicopter, lowered on a hoist to the ship below. The mission is simple.
We're here to make sure that the ships get in and out safely and don't cause infrastructure or environmental damage.
It's a fancy way of saying they don't run aground.
Or hit a bridge. Yeah, that's, if you didn't have pilots, then you're kind of putting your whole port at jeopardy.
The pilots board the ships miles beyond the Columbia River Bar to give everyone a chance to prepare. It takes knowledge and confidence to guide such a huge vessel.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you.
The pilots put together this graphic to give us all an idea of the size. Portland's Wells Fargo Tower is 546 feet tall. The ship here, 900 feet long.
Yeah, got a chart.
The pilots are on call 24/7. Unless the weather is so bad that the bar is closed, they will meet ships anytime, day or night. When it's really bad outside, the helicopter cannot fly, and the pilots revert to boarding the ship in the same method that's been used since their founding 173 years ago, the rope ladder. They shoot video every time they get on or off a ship so they can study exactly what happened if something feels wrong. Some of the videos they shared would make the bravest among us think twice. Remember, there's no safety line here. Misjudge the roll of the ship or crash of the waves, and you could fall into the ocean.
Timed that one wrong, didn't I?
That has happened. It happened with deadly consequences on January 2006. Pilot Kevin Murray was getting off a ship in a storm. He fell and died before he could be rescued. So why would anyone do this? Phil Mateo says he just loves being outside.
Like I say, 90% of the time I'm like, wow, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. But 10% of the time is I can't believe I'm doing this no matter what they're paying me. So.
Mateo spent 27 years at sea before he became a pilot 11 years ago.
Phil, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go outside.
We go outside to get in position for the shots, and it feels dangerous.
You all right?
We're wearing life jackets because the left and right side of the pilot boat has no railing.
This is a stretch you really want to hold on.
That way they can use either side to snuggle up next to the ship.
And let's just get inside here. Or
Dan ushers us into a safe spot with hand railings all around. A light rain is falling, just so we can get a small sense of what the weather can do out here. This is routine for the pilots, but for me it felt so weird to motor up to this huge ship as it putters along waiting for us. You can tell it's empty because it's sitting high in the water. Once it's loaded, that rust will be below the waterline. An empty ship can be harder to get on because it can roll more side to side.
notice he's got a harness on.
As we get closer, the deckhand comes out of the pilot boat and gets strapped in. He's here to help the pilot if he needs anything at the last second. The strap to his harness makes sure he does not go overboard. The water rushing between the boat and the ship is a constant reminder of the danger here.
You come up that side.
And then it's time for Phil. He's wearing a helmet just in case and grabs that thick rope for safety as our skipper eases even closer to the ship. And then...
So once he gets up, we back the boat away, so if he falls in the water instead of on the boat.
Just like that, he's on board. In 2.5 hours, he'll have the ship across the bar and waiting at anchor in Astoria for the river pilot, who will guide it to whichever dock it's going to. And then we turn for our next ship, an oil barge.
What do you like about being out here?
No walls.
You hear that a lot in the pilot world.
Yeah. No, this is an articulating tug and barge. A tugboat pushing a oil barge. Came down from Anacortes, gasoline, unleaded gas for the Portland area.
Since this one is full, it's lower in the water and easier for the pilot, Bill Black, to get on board. But once again, no safety lines, nothing between him and the ocean if he slips or something breaks. And yet, despite my nervously watching them, the pilots climb the ladder with ease, night and day, every day of the year that the bar is open. With all of the traffic on our rivers and all of the possibilities for disaster, it feels amazing that everything runs smoothly. But it does.
Oh, just walk into work? Pull up to the ladder, climb up a few steps, and you're at work. It's not a bad commute for us.
We are certainly drawn into the wild places of the Northwest. Sadly, many have found themselves lost in treacherous places. Up next, we meet former Sheriff Joe Wampler. For many decades, he has led the search for those who are lost. Welcome back. Now, we think of Mount Hood in the National Forest as vast, as enormous, and of course they are. But this next story is about a man who seems to know every tree, every clearing, and every crevasse. He is an impressive man, Pat.
He really is. Joe Wampler is his name, and it's sort of like the forest out there is his backyard.
So, give me a sense of this man. You've covered him for so many years.
Yeah.
How's he do it?
Well, he's a great guy with a big heart, and his bottom line feeling is if people are lost or they're hurt, it's his call to service to go find them and bring them home.
Wow, that looks scary.
Last summer, during a search for a missing climber,
Jesus Christ.
an airplane flew so low over the top of Mount Hood that even rescue teams were amazed.
Here he comes.
At the controls, the retired sheriff from Hood River County, Joe Wampler. He later sent me this picture showing where he'd spotted a climber who threatened suicide but was still very much alive. Wampler let searcher Steve Rollins and the ground crews know.
It was a dangerous time of year to be climbing the mountain. I didn't really want to climb the mountain at that time of year unless we needed to. We didn't even know if somebody was up there.
The result, this incredible moment when an Oregon National Guard helicopter landed at the summit to pick up the rescue team and the climber after they scaled the mountain to help him out. The retired sheriff's flying skills are legendary.
When I saw him flying over the mountain like that, I would have thought he was trying to crop dust the summit. That was crazy.
Maybe for someone else, but Joe Wampler is no ordinary pilot. He's taken to the sky thousands of times over 4 decades to help find the lost, on the mountain or in the wilderness of the Columbia Gorge. It's a world-class playground that sometimes turns dangerous. And when it does, Wampler is often the guy who is there to help.
That's why nobody ever goes with us.
Sometimes he takes pictures with his phone as he flies over the forest at treetop level, banking the plane to see better out the side. This is one of those pictures. It gives you an idea of how sharp his vision is. Can you spot the missing hiker among the trees?
Now I gotta remember where she's at here.
That white spot. That's all he saw.
There she is. Yeah. There. Right there.
That's all it took.
That's her right there.
Wampler ended up in law enforcement after deciding as a 13-year-old it would be his future. Long before he put on a uniform, he'd follow his dad to searches and then wait in patrol cars.
I just always knew.
There's a lot of rocks. He can get behind.
He never strayed from danger in search and rescue or routine calls. And in this rural county, like many in the Northwest, he was often the first and only one to show up when people really needed help.
What's that like, showing up and knowing that there's nobody else coming to help? It's just you.
You just do it.
He's a living example of the tough and resourceful Western sheriff. To Wampler, the lost are often just a few hunches away from being found.
We literally failed him, but, we tried our best.
But it does not always bring a happy ending. Wampler took part in some of the most high-profile, agonizing searches in our area, including the failed rescue effort to save climbers Kelly James and his 2 friends Brian Hall and Jerry Nico Cook back in 2006.
6 teams, a total of 23 searchers, have hiked up and spread out across the rugged and snowy terrain of Mount Hood.
The men were all from out of town. They climbed Mount Hood from the Hood River side in early December, just as a massive storm crashed into the mountain with hurricane-force winds. After a week of searching, the body of James was found in a snow cave near the summit. His 2 friends, who went looking for help during the storm, were never found. It's a constant irritant to his internal drive to find and help people.
Does that bug you?
Oh yeah. Oh no, I'm here to save people.
Joe Wampler's days of organizing big searches are over now. He retired in 2013. While the official part of his life is over, the internal call to help will not be still. Mountain rescue teams who often rely on Wampler find his help priceless.
I don't know how we would replace Joe in terms of his ability to know the mountain, know search and rescue, and ability to fly very aggressively.
At 65 years old, Joe Wampler has a lot of years left to serve the community. It's what he's done all his life. He's rescued thousands and felt their love and appreciation, and he's not about to stop.
That's what, from day one when I was a teenager to just this week, they can't pay anything and nobody cares about that. But when they thank you, that's all, and that's why you do it right there. That's the bottom line.
It's the kind of person you're really thankful is out there. There's a man like that.
Absolutely.
Pat, thank you so much. Now, to close out our program, we meet Bob Rogers, a man who has literally lived history. At 100 years old, he shares how his service to our country began with World War II and continues to this day.
When you attend the birthday party of a 100-year-old who can dance a little jig, it's a good day. And Bob Rogers' birthday was a very good day. It gave his fellow residents in Northeast Portland at Parkview Christian Retirement Community a chance to gather for some cake and to say thank you. Rogers grew up in Butte, Montana, and joined what was then called the Army Air Corps in 1941. He was just in time for World War II, and even has a historic paper nearby to prove it. Rogers served as a maintenance operator and flight engineer in bombers and saw places like Iwo Jima and Okinawa.
Well, when they fly in the bombers and planes, when they finish the conversation, they say, "Roger, over and out." And the first time I heard that, I thought, my God, what have I done now? What do you mean, Roger, over and out, throw him out?
His sense of humor has served him well over the years, but he's not kidding when he says he loved the military.
But the military was a wonderful place for people to be. For one thing, the government was very careful about spending money for food, right? No. They bought the best food there was. You couldn't find better food. You couldn't find better lodgings, and we were just a family. So it was really a wonderful thing to be in the military. I wanted to stay in as long as I could.
He stayed in nearly 30 years, surviving World War II and then Korea, and finding himself at the Air Defense Command during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 1960s. He made sure the crews maintaining the planes did their jobs well and that they had the supplies and systems they needed to keep the squadrons flying. He and many others expected to die if the U.S. and Russia went to war over the missiles that Russia had moved to Cuba.
And my wife even had a phone number that she was going to leave because we figured we'd be one of the first bases hit at a retaliatory strike.
Fortunately for all of us, it did not happen. The Russians took the missiles out of Cuba and no shots were fired.
Okay.
Bob Rogers got an honorable discharge as a senior master sergeant, then worked many years in the post office before his retirement. Now in his 100th year, it's a bit harder to get around than before, but that old uniform coat and hat still fit just fine. Bob Rogers, a veteran who served America for most of his life, is now in his golden years and accepting well-deserved gifts. What else would you give a 100-year-old?
Pat, thank you so much. I mean, I think these stories really do capture what it means to live your life to try and help others.
Yeah, in the service of others, and I've really enjoyed telling them, and it's just become clear to me, you don't have to do something big. Little things done consistently make a huge difference.
You got it. Pat, thanks again, and thanks to all of you at home for tuning in and spending a little time with us today. All of the stories in Pat's series, Those Who Serve, are available as a playlist right now on KGW's YouTube page. Look for them there now. If you know someone also who serves this country or our community, let us know. Send us an email to mykgw@kgw.com. Thank you for joining us for this special presentation. For KGW News, I'm Dan Haggerty.